Colonel Marcus Webb gripped the radio handset so tight his knuckles turned white. The static-filled voice on the other end painted a picture that made his stomach drop like a stone. "Sir, forward operating base Sandstone is under heavy attack. Multiple casualties reported. The situation it's bad, sir. Really bad." Marcus stared at the map spread across his desk in the command center 60 miles away. Red pins marked enemy positions that seemed to be closing in on the small outpost from 3 directions. Sandstone housed barely 200 soldiers, mostly young recruits on their first deployment. The base served as a crucial supply point for operations in the region, but it was also dangerously isolated. "What's the casualty count, Sergeant?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Unknown at this time, sir. We lost contact with our medic station 20 minutes ago. Last report mentioned at least 30 wounded, possibly more." Marcus closed his eyes. 30 wounded soldiers in a base under siege meant those men and women were likely bleeding out, while enemy fire kept rescue teams pinned down. The nearest field hospital was 4 hours away by convoy, assuming the road stayed clear. By helicopter, it would be 45 minutes, but the sandstorm that had been raging for the past 6 hours made air support impossible. "Sir," the radio crackled again. "What are your orders?" Marcus looked around the command center. His staff officers watched him with the same grim expression he felt on his own face. Everyone knew the math. Everyone understood what those wounded soldiers were facing. "Prep the relief convoy," Marcus ordered. "Full medical support, additional ammunition, and every available medic we can spare. I want wheels rolling in 20 minutes. "Sir, the storm." "I know about the storm, Sergeant." "We go anyway." Marcus had commanded soldiers for 15 years. He'd seen combat in 3 different theaters and earned his stars through decisive action and careful planning. But this situation felt different. This felt personal. Many of the soldiers at Sandstone had trained under his watch. Some were barely 20 years old, fresh out of basic training with their whole lives ahead of them. As his staff scrambled to organize the relief effort, Marcus studied the intelligence reports. The enemy had chosen their timing perfectly. The sandstorm provided cover for their approach while grounding all aircraft. The attack had come at shift change, when guards were rotating and attention might be divided. Whoever planned this assault knew their business. The convoy would take 4 hours to reach Sandstone if everything went perfectly. But with the storm, hostile forces in the area, and the possibility of roadside bombs, it could take much longer. Marcus had to assume the worst and hope for the best. Colonel Webb, a young communications officer, approached with a worried expression. "We've lost all radio contact with FOB Sandstone. Complete blackout, sir." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. No communication meant no way to know if the base was still holding or if it had been overrun. It meant no way to coordinate with defenders or guide the relief convoy to the safest approach route. Most importantly, it meant no way to know if those wounded soldiers were still alive. Marcus walked to the window of the command center. Outside, the sandstorm raged with such intensity that he could barely see the vehicles parked 50 yards away. The wind howled like a living thing, carrying sand particles that would strip paint from metal and flesh from bone. Flying in this weather would be suicide for any pilot. "Sir, the convoy is ready to move," his operations officer reported. Marcus nodded, but his mind was racing through alternatives. A 4-hour drive through hostile territory during a sandstorm to reach a base that might already be lost. Even if they arrived in time, would they find anyone left to save? Change of plans, Marcus announced suddenly. "I'm going with a convoy." His staff exchanged glances. "Sir, with respect, that's not advisable. If something happens to you, those soldiers are my responsibility." Marcus cut him off. "I put them in that position. I'm not going to sit here in comfort while they fight for their lives." Within minutes, Marcus had gathered his gear and climbed into the lead vehicle of the convoy. 23 trucks and armored personnel carriers formed a long line behind him, loaded with medical supplies, ammunition, and 40 of the best soldiers he could spare. The convoy also included 6 military medics and 2 field surgeons who had volunteered for the dangerous mission. As they rolled out into the storm, visibility dropped to less than 10 feet. The driver had to follow the taillights of a guide vehicle that crept forward at walking speed, feeling for the road with painstaking care. Sand whipped across the windshield with such violence that the wipers could barely keep up. "This is insane," muttered the sergeant in the passenger seat. Marcus didn't disagree, but he kept his doubts to himself. Leadership meant projecting confidence even when you felt anything but confident. Especially then, 3 hours into the journey, the convoy had covered barely half the distance to FOB Sandstone. They had to stop twice to dig vehicles out of sand drifts, and once to repair a truck that had thrown a track in the shifting ground. Worse, they'd started receiving sporadic small arms fire from positions they couldn't even see in the storm. Marcus studied his map by flashlight, trying to calculate arrival time. At their current pace, they wouldn't reach Sandstone until well after midnight. By then, any wounded soldiers who hadn't received immediate treatment would likely be beyond help. The radio crackled with static. Then, a faint voice broke through. Any station, this is Sandstone Base. We are still operational. Repeat, Sandstone Base is still operational." Marcus grabbed the handset so fast he nearly dropped it. "Sandstone, this is Colonel Webb. What's your status?" "Sir, enemy forces have pulled back. We're secure for now, but we have wounded who need immediate evacuation." "How many wounded?" Marcus asked. There was a pause that seemed to last forever. Then, "Sir, that's the strange thing. We had 37 casualties during the attack. But somehow they're all stable now." "All of them?" Marcus frowned. 37 wounded soldiers, and all of them stable? In a base that had been cut off from outside medical support for hours? That didn't make sense. "Explain stable, Sandstone." "Sir, I can't explain it. Our medic, she did something. I don't know how, but she saved them all. Every single one." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. One medic had somehow stabilized 37 wounded soldiers under combat conditions with limited supplies? That was either a miracle or impossible. "We'll be there in approximately 1 hour," Marcus transmitted. "Hold your position." As the convoy resumed its crawl through the storm, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary had happened at FOB Sandstone. In 15 years of military service, he'd seen incredible acts of heroism and skill, but what the radio operator described went beyond anything in his experience. The storm began to weaken as they approached the base perimeter. Through the swirling sand, Marcus could see the outline of guard towers and the fence line that marked the boundaries of FOB Sandstone. Flares burned at regular intervals, casting eerie red light through the haze. What he didn't see were signs of the fierce battle that should have left the base scarred and damaged. No smoking ruins, no obvious breaches in the perimeter, no scattered equipment or debris. If anything, the base looked almost normal. Marcus keyed his radio as they approached the main gate. "Sandstone, this is Colonel Webb. We're at your front door." "Copy that, sir. Gates are opening now. Direct your convoy to the medical facility. You're going to want to see this for yourself." The massive steel gates swung open to reveal a scene that made Marcus question everything he thought he knew about combat medicine. Soldiers moved around the base with purpose and energy. Guard posts were properly manned. Equipment was stored and secured exactly as regulations required. For a base that had just survived a major attack, FOB Sandstone looked remarkably organized. Marcus stepped out of his vehicle in front of the medical facility and immediately noticed something else unusual. The normal sounds of a field hospital were missing. No urgent shouting. No sounds of medical equipment running at full capacity. No organized chaos that typically followed mass casualty events. Instead, he heard something that seemed impossible under the circumstances. Quiet, calm voices discussing routine matters. Captain Reynolds, the base commander, approached with an expression that mixed relief, confusion, and something that looked almost like awe. "Sir, thank God you're here," Reynolds said, saluting sharply. "But I have to tell you what happened tonight. I've never seen anything like it." Marcus returned the salute and looked toward the medical facility. "Your radio operator mentioned 37 casualties, all stable. I need to understand how that's possible." Reynolds shook his head slowly. "Sir, I wish I could explain it. All I know is that when the attack started, We had wounded soldiers scattered across the base. Some were hit bad, sir. Really bad. We thought we were going to lose a lot of good people tonight. And then, Corpsman Sarah Martinez went to work. I don't know what she did or how she did it, but somehow she stabilized every single wounded soldier. Some of them should have died, sir. The wounds were that severe. Marcus felt his skepticism rising. Captain, in my experience, when something sounds too good to be true. I know how it sounds, sir, but I've seen the wounded. I've talked to them. They're not just stable, they're alert and responsive. Some are already asking when they can return to duty. As they walked toward the medical facility, Marcus tried to reconcile what he was hearing with his understanding of combat medicine. Even the best military medics, working with full equipment and support staff, couldn't achieve the kind of results being described. One person, working alone under combat conditions, simply couldn't save 37 severely wounded soldiers. Yet the evidence of his senses suggested otherwise. The base was functioning normally. Soldiers were moving around without the subdued atmosphere that usually followed heavy casualties. Everything he saw contradicted the reports of a desperate battle with massive wounds and potential fatalities. Sir, Captain Reynolds stopped walking and turned to face Marcus directly. There's something else you need to know before you meet Corpsman Martinez. What's that? She's not like other medics, sir. I mean, her training records are standard. Her qualifications are exactly what you'd expect. But tonight she did things that don't appear in any medical manual I've ever read. Marcus stopped walking. What kind of things? You'll see for yourself, sir. But I want you to be prepared. What you're going to witness might challenge some of your assumptions about what's possible in emergency medicine. As they approached the entrance to the medical facility, Marcus could hear voices inside. Not the urgent, stressed voices of medical personnel dealing with crisis, but calm, even cheerful conversation. Someone was actually laughing. Reynolds pulled open the door and stepped aside to let Marcus enter first. The sight that greeted him stopped him dead in his tracks. The medical facility was filled with soldiers who should have been fighting for their lives. Instead, they were sitting up in their beds, talking quietly among themselves, eating from meal trays, and generally behaving like patients recovering from routine procedures rather than combat veterans who had just survived severe wounds. A young woman in military fatigues moved between the beds, checking on each patient with quiet efficiency. She moved with the confidence of someone completely comfortable in her environment, showing no signs of the exhaustion that should have followed hours of emergency surgery. This had to be Corpsman Sarah Martinez, the medic who had apparently achieved the impossible. Marcus watched her work for several minutes before approaching. She moved from bed to bed with practiced ease, checking bandages, taking vital signs, and speaking quietly with each soldier. What struck him most was the atmosphere in the room. Despite everything they'd been through, the wounded soldiers seemed relaxed and confident in their recovery. Corpsman Martinez? Marcus called out. The young woman turned toward him, and Marcus got his first clear look at the person who had reportedly saved 37 lives in a single night. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in regulation style and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. Yes, sir. She approached and saluted crisply. I'm Colonel Webb. I understand you've had quite a night. Sarah's expression remained professional, but Marcus caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Uncertainty? Concern? Fear? Just doing my job, sir. Marcus looked around the medical facility again. Corpsman, I've been briefed on tonight's casualties. 37 wounded, some severely. Yet everyone in this room appears to be in stable condition. How did you manage that? Sarah hesitated for just a moment before answering. Training, sir, and maybe a little luck. But Marcus had been reading people for too long to accept such a simple explanation. There was more to this story, much more. And before he left FOB Sandstone, he intended to find out exactly what had happened during those desperate hours when one young medic had apparently achieved the impossible. Marcus walked slowly through the medical facility, stopping at each bed to speak with the wounded soldiers. What he discovered challenged everything he thought he knew about combat injuries and military medicine. Private Johnson, 19 years old from Ohio, had taken shrapnel to his chest and abdomen. According to his chart, the wounds should have been life-threatening. Yet Johnson sat upright, eating solid food and joking with the soldier in the next bed. "How are you feeling, son?" Marcus asked. "Pretty good, sir. Corpsman Martinez fixed me right up. Said I might even be back on duty in a few days." Marcus examined the bandages covering Johnson's wounds. They were clean, properly applied, and showed no signs of bleeding or infection. But more than that, Johnson's color was good, his breathing was normal, and he showed no signs of the pain and trauma that should accompany such serious injuries. "Tell me about your treatment," Marcus said. "What did Corpsman Martinez do?" Johnson's expression grew thoughtful. "Well, sir, that's the funny thing. I remember getting hit, and I remember thinking I was done for. There was blood everywhere, and I couldn't breathe right. But then she showed up, and what? This is going to sound crazy, sir, but it was like she knew exactly what was wrong before she even examined me. She just started working, and within minutes I could breathe again. The pain went away. It was like magic." Marcus moved to the next bed, where Sergeant Williams was recovering from what appeared to be a severe leg wound. The medical chart indicated possible bone fractures and significant tissue damage, yet Williams was sitting up and moving his leg normally. "Sergeant, can you walk?" "Yes, sir." Corpsman Martinez said the bone wasn't broken after all, just looked bad because of all the blood. Marcus frowned. Combat medics were skilled, but they weren't equipped to perform detailed bone analysis under field conditions. Yet somehow Martinez had correctly assessed that Williams' injury was less severe than it initially appeared. As he continued his rounds, Marcus heard similar stories from each wounded soldier. Injuries that should have required surgical intervention had been treated with basic field medicine. Wounds that should have left soldiers incapacitated had somehow healed enough to allow normal movement. Blood loss that should have put men in shock had somehow been stopped quickly enough to prevent complications. Each story individually might be explained by luck, adrenaline, or medical skill. But 37 similar stories suggested something else entirely. Marcus found Captain Reynolds near the facility's supply area. "Captain, I need to see Corpsman Martinez's medical records and training files." "Already pulled them, sir." Reynolds handed over a thick folder. "Everything's standard. She completed basic medical training at Fort Sam Houston, served 2 deployments without incident, received good fitness reports. Nothing unusual." Marcus flipped through the files. Sarah Martinez had indeed followed a completely normal career path for a military medic. Her training scores were good, but not exceptional. Her performance evaluations were solid, but contained no mention of extraordinary abilities or innovative techniques. "What about tonight specifically?" Marcus asked. "Walk me through exactly what happened." Reynolds consulted his notes. "The attack began at 1900 hours. Enemy forces hit us from 3 directions simultaneously. Small arms fire, mortars, and what appear to be coordinated squad-level assaults on our perimeter. Casualties started almost immediately. IED explosion near the motor pool caught 6 soldiers. Sniper fire from a ridge line got 4 more. Mortar rounds in the living area wounded another dozen. By 1930 hours, we had soldiers down all over the base." Marcus did quick math in his head. 37 casualties spread across a 200-person base in 30 minutes meant the attack had been both intense and effective. Under normal circumstances, the medical facility would have been overwhelmed. How did Martinez handle the volume? "That's just it, sir. She shouldn't have been able to handle it. Our medical facility is set up for maybe 10 casualties at once, with support from additional medics and proper equipment. But Martinez was working alone, and somehow she managed to treat everyone." "Working alone?" "Our other 2 medics were pinned down in different areas of the base during the attack. Martinez was the only medical personnel who could move freely. She treated soldiers where they fell, then somehow got them all back to the facility." Marcus closed the file and looked around the medical facility again. Moving 37 wounded soldiers under combat conditions would normally require a large team and multiple vehicles. One person couldn't possibly transport that many casualties while also providing emergency medical treatment. "Captain, I want to speak with some of the soldiers who weren't wounded. Give me eyewitness accounts of what they saw during Martinez's treatment." 20 minutes later, Marcus was interviewing Corporal Davis, who had been on guard duty during the attack and had witnessed several of Martinez's treatments. "She moved like someone who'd done this 1,000 times before," Davis reported. "But here's the weird part, sir. She seemed to know where the wounded soldiers were before anyone called for help. Like she could sense where people were hurt." "Explain that." "Well, sir, I saw her running toward the motor pool before anyone had reported casualties there. She arrived just as the IED went off. Same thing happened at the living quarters. She was already moving in that direction when a mortar rounds hit." Marcus made notes as Davis continued. "And when she treated the wounded, she worked faster than anyone I've ever seen. It was like she knew exactly what was wrong and exactly how to fix it. No hesitation, no second guessing." "Did you see her perform any unusual medical procedures?" Davis hesitated. "Sir, I'm not a medic, so I don't know what's normal. But I saw her treat Private Kelly, who had taken a round through the shoulder. There was blood everywhere, and Kelly was unconscious. Martinez worked on him for maybe 2 minutes, and then Kelly just opened his eyes and started talking normally." 2 minutes? "Yes, sir. I was timing it because I thought we needed a call for evacuation. But by the time I would have made the call, Kelly was sitting up and asking for water." Marcus thanked Davis and moved on to interview other witnesses. Each account he heard added another piece to a puzzle that didn't fit together in any logical way. Sergeant Martinez had apparently moved around the base with perfect knowledge of where casualties were located. She had treated complex wounds in impossibly short amounts of time. She had somehow transported 37 wounded soldiers to the medical facility without assistance. And she had achieved survival rates that defied medical explanation. As the night progressed, Marcus found himself facing an uncomfortable conclusion. Either multiple reliable soldiers were lying about what they'd witnessed, or corpsman Sarah Martinez possessed abilities that went far beyond normal medical training. He decided to confront Martinez directly. Marcus found her in the supply room, restocking medical equipment with the same calm efficiency she'd shown while treating patients. She looked up as he entered, and again he caught that flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Corpsman Martinez, I need you to explain what happened here tonight." "I treated wounded soldiers, sir. That's my job. 37 wounded soldiers. Alone, under combat conditions, with limited supplies and no support staff." Marcus kept his voice level but firm. "That's not possible under normal circumstances." Sarah continued organizing supplies, not meeting his eyes. "Sometimes people are capable of more than they think they are, sir. Adrenaline, training, necessity. I've spoken with witnesses. I've examined the wounded. What you accomplished tonight goes beyond adrenaline and training." Sarah finally stopped working and faced him directly. "Sir, are you suggesting I did something wrong?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking for an explanation that makes sense." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Marcus had interrogated enough people over the years to recognize when someone was holding back important information. Sarah Martinez was definitely hiding something. "Sir, with respect, does it matter how I did it? The important thing is that our people are alive and recovering. It matters because I need to understand what resources are available to my command. If you've developed new techniques or procedures that could save lives in the future, the military needs to know about them." Sarah's expression grew guarded. "I don't have any new techniques, sir. I just did what my training taught me to do." Marcus pulled out his notebook and consulted his interview notes. "Multiple witnesses report that you seem to know where casualties were located before receiving reports. How do you explain that?" "Lucky guesses based on where the attacks were focused. Witnesses report treatment times that seem impossibly fast for the severity of injuries involved. Combat conditions require quick decision-making. Witnesses report that you transported 37 casualties to this facility without assistance. I made multiple trips." Marcus closed his notebook. Each answer was technically possible, but collectively unlikely. Sarah Martinez was clearly intelligent enough to provide plausible explanations for everything she'd accomplished, but the explanations didn't add up to a believable whole. "Corpsman Martinez, I'm going to ask you directly, and I want a straight answer. Do you have any special training, equipment, or techniques that aren't reflected in your official records? Sarah met his gaze steadily. No, sir. Do you have any explanation for how you achieve results that multiple medical experts would consider impossible? No, sir. Marcus studied her face. She wasn't lying, exactly, but she wasn't telling the complete truth either. There were layers to this situation that he hadn't uncovered yet. All right, corpseman. But this conversation isn't over. I'll be conducting a formal investigation into tonight's events. I recommend you think carefully about whether there's anything else you want to tell me. As Marcus left the supply room, he realized he was facing a dilemma that went far beyond normal military concerns. If Sarah Martinez had somehow developed revolutionary medical techniques, the military needed to understand and replicate them. But if she possessed abilities that couldn't be explained or duplicated, that raised entirely different questions. Either way, he wasn't leaving FOB Sandstone until he understood what had really happened during those crucial hours when one young medic had apparently achieved the impossible. Marcus spent the rest of the night reviewing medical charts, interviewing additional witnesses, and trying to piece together a timeline that made sense. What he discovered only deepened the mystery. According to multiple sources, Sarah Martinez had been in at least 4 different locations simultaneously during the height of the attack. She had treated wounds that required surgical intervention using only basic field supplies. She had somehow prevented shock and blood loss in casualties who should have died within minutes of their injuries. As dawn approached, Marcus stood outside the medical facility watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of gold and orange. Behind him, 37 soldiers who should have been dead were eating breakfast and discussing their plans for recovery. Whatever had happened at FOB Sandstone during the night, it represented something unprecedented in military medicine. Marcus knew he had a responsibility to understand it, document it, and determine whether it could be replicated to save other lives. But first, he had to figure out why Sarah Martinez was so determined to hide the truth about her extraordinary abilities. Dawn brought Marcus no closer to understanding what had happened at FOB Sandstone, but it did bring an unexpected development. As he reviewed medical charts in Captain Reynolds' office, his radio crackled with an urgent message from Regional Command. Colonel Webb, we're receiving reports of similar incidents at 3 other forward operating bases in your sector. Medical miracles, impossible survival rates, individual medics achieving results that defy explanation. Marcus felt his blood run cold. If what had happened at Sandstone was occurring elsewhere, it couldn't be dismissed as an isolated anomaly or a case of exaggerated reporting. Give me details, Marcus transmitted. FOB Desert Rose, 60 miles southeast of your position. 24 casualties from a vehicle convoy ambush, all saved by a single medic named Chun. FOB Iron Gate, 40 miles north. 18 casualties from a coordinated rocket attack, all stable thanks to Medic Rodriguez. And FOB Phoenix, 30 miles west. 31 casualties from a complex assault, all recovered under the care of Medic Thompson. Marcus stared at his map, marking the locations of the 4 bases. They formed a rough diamond pattern across the operational area, with distances that made coordination or communication between the medics impossible. Yet all 4 had experienced similar attacks and achieved similar impossible results on the same night. Sir, there's more, the voice on the radio continued. Intelligence reports suggest these attacks were coordinated by enemy forces. The timing, tactics, and targeting all indicate a single planning source. Understood. I want detailed reports on all 4 incidents within 6 hours. Marcus turned to Captain Reynolds, who had been listening to the radio traffic with growing amazement. Captain, I need to speak with Corpsman Martinez immediately. And this time, I want complete honesty. They found Sarah in the medical facility, making final rounds of her patients. Many of the soldiers who had been critically wounded 12 hours earlier were now sitting up, eating solid food, and discussing when they might return to active duty. The sight still seemed impossible to Marcus, despite having witnessed it himself. Corpsman Martinez, we need to talk. Privately. Sarah followed Marcus and Reynolds to a small office adjacent to the medical facility. Marcus closed the door and activated a radio jamming device that would prevent their conversation from being overheard. Last night, 3 other bases in this region experienced attacks similar to the one here, Marcus began. Each base had a single medic who achieved results identical to what you accomplished. Impossible survival rates, miraculous recoveries, wounds that healed faster than medical science can explain. Sarah's face went pale, but she remained silent. This wasn't coincidence, Marcus continued. 4 coordinated enemy attacks, 4 impossible medical outcomes, for medics who can't explain how they saved so many lives. I need to know what's really going on. For a long moment, Sarah said nothing. Marcus could see her weighing options, calculating risks, trying to decide how much truth she could safely reveal. Sir, I can't explain what the other medics did. I can only tell you what I did. Then tell me that. The real story, not the sanitized version you gave me earlier. Sarah took a deep breath. Sir, what I'm going to tell you is going to sound impossible, but it's the truth. Marcus leaned forward. I'm listening. 3 months ago, I started experiencing changes. During medical training exercises, I began to sense injuries before examining patients. I could tell what was wrong with people just by being near them. At first, I thought it was just experience and intuition, but it was more than that. Yes, sir. I could feel their pain, their injuries, their body's responses to trauma. And somehow I could influence those responses. I could slow bleeding, reduce shock, accelerate healing processes. Marcus felt his skepticism warring with what he'd witnessed. You're talking about supernatural abilities. I'm talking about abilities I don't understand, Sarah corrected. I don't know how they work or why I have them, but they're real. Have you told anyone else about this? No, sir. Would you have believed me? Marcus had to admit she had a point. 3 days ago, he would have recommended psychological evaluation for any soldier making such claims. But after seeing 37 impossible recoveries, he was forced to consider possibilities he'd never contemplated. You said this started 3 months ago. What triggered it? Sarah hesitated again. There was an incident during field training. A live-fire exercise went wrong, and several soldiers were injured. I was treating a soldier with a sucking chest wound when something changed. I felt connected to him somehow, like I could sense exactly what his body needed to heal. And you helped him recover? He should have died on the spot. Instead, he was back on duty within a week. The investigating officers attributed it to exceptional field medicine and luck. Marcus made mental notes, trying to piece together a timeline. Have there been other incidents since then? Small ones. A few soldiers with minor injuries who recovered faster than expected. I was careful to make it look normal, within the range of possibility. But last night was different. Last night, I couldn't hold back. There were too many wounded soldiers, too many lives at stake. I used everything I could do to save them. Marcus stood and paced the small office. If Sarah was telling the truth, she possessed abilities that could revolutionize military medicine. But they also raised questions that went far beyond medical applications. Sarah, I need you to consider the bigger picture. If you really have these abilities, and if there are others like you, this could change everything about how we treat wounded soldiers. Or it could destroy my life, and theirs, Sarah replied quietly. Marcus stopped pacing. What do you mean? Sir, think about what would happen if this became public knowledge. We'd become test subjects, laboratory experiments. They want to study us, figure out how we do what we do, try to replicate it or weaponize it. The thought had already occurred to Marcus, and it made him uncomfortable. The military's first instinct would be to understand and control any unusual capabilities displayed by personnel. But the ethical implications of studying people with unexplained abilities were complex and troubling. There's another possibility, Marcus said carefully. What if this isn't natural? What if someone or something gave you these abilities? Sarah's expression grew troubled. I've thought about that. The timing is suspicious. All 4 incidents on the same night, after months of smaller events that went unnoticed. Do you remember anything unusual happening 3 months ago? Any contact with unknown persons, exposure to unusual materials, medical treatments? Sarah shook her head. Nothing I can think of. It just started gradually during that training exercise. Marcus's radio buzzed with an encrypted message. He read it quickly, then looked up at Sarah with growing concern. The other 3 medics have been ordered to report to Regional Command for debriefing. You're being transferred there as well, effective immediately. Sir, what kind of debriefing? Marcus had been in the military long enough to read between the lines of official orders. When soldiers with unexplained abilities were summoned for immediate debriefing by Regional Command, it usually meant they were about to disappear into classified programs that their families would never hear about again. I don't know, he admitted, but I suspect once you report to Regional Command, you won't be coming back to normal duty anytime soon. Sarah stood up, her face pale but determined. Then, I'm not reporting to Regional Command. That's desertion, corpsman. You could face court-martial. Better than disappearing into some black project where I become a laboratory rat. Marcus found himself facing an impossible choice. As a military officer, his duty was clear: follow orders and ensure Sarah reported as directed. But as a human being who had witnessed what she could accomplish, he had to consider whether the military's interest in studying her abilities was worth destroying the life of a young soldier who had saved 37 lives. Sir, Sarah continued, there's something else you need to know. When I was treating the wounded last night, I sensed something. A presence, like someone was watching or guiding what I was doing. What kind of presence? I don't know how to describe it. It felt ancient, powerful, and definitely not human. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert morning. Are you saying something else was involved in what happened here? I'm saying I don't think these abilities are random or natural. Something gave them to us, and whatever it was had a purpose. Before Marcus could respond, his radio crackled again with another priority message. This time, the news made his blood run cold. Colonel Webb, we've lost contact with FOB's Desert Rose, Iron Gate, and Phoenix. All 3 bases have gone dark simultaneously. Marcus stared at Sarah, who had gone completely pale. The other medics? Unknown. We're dispatching reconnaissance teams, but earliest arrival at any site is 4 hours. Marcus turned off his radio and looked at Sarah. 3 bases with impossible medical recoveries. 3 medics with unexplained abilities. And now all 3 bases have gone silent. Sir, I think we need to get out of here. Whatever gave us these abilities, I don't think it's done with us yet. As if summoned by her words, the base alarm began sounding. Through the office window, Marcus could see soldiers running to defensive positions and vehicles moving rapidly across the compound. Captain Reynolds burst through the office door. Sir, we've got multiple aircraft approaching from the east. They're not responding to radio challenges, and they're not showing on our identification systems. Marcus grabbed his binoculars and moved to the window. In the distance, he could see 4 black helicopters approaching FOB Sandstone in perfect formation. They moved with military precision, but displayed no identifying markings or national insignia. Those aren't enemy aircraft, Marcus realized. They're ours. Or at least, they're American. Sir, what are your orders? Reynolds asked. Marcus looked at Sarah, who was staring at the approaching helicopters with an expression of resigned determination. Those helicopters are coming for the medics, aren't they? She asked quietly. Marcus suspected she was right. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Regional Command had ordered the medics to report for debriefing, and now unmarked aircraft were arriving to collect them. Probably. Sarah moved toward the door. Then, I need to disappear before they land. Wait. Marcus made a decision that would probably end his career, but felt like the right thing to do. If you're going to run, you'll need help. And you'll need to understand what you're really running from. He turned to Captain Reynolds. Captain, I need you to delay those helicopters for as long as possible. Equipment checks, security protocols, whatever you can think of. Give us 30 minutes. Sir, if those are official aircraft. Captain, I'm giving you a direct order. Delay them. As Reynolds hurried out to deal with the approaching helicopters, Marcus turned back to Sarah. If someone or something gave you these abilities, and if they're now collecting all the medics who receive them, you need to figure out what they want and how to stop them. Sir, I can't do that alone. Marcus grabbed his gear and headed for the door. Then, It's a good thing you won't be alone. Marcus led Sarah through a network of maintenance tunnels beneath FOB sandstone that most personnel didn't know existed. Above them, they could hear the sound of helicopters landing and boots hitting the ground as teams deployed to secure the base. "Sir, why are you helping me?" Sarah asked as they navigated the narrow concrete passages. "Because 37 soldiers are alive today because of what you did," Marcus replied. "And because I've spent 15 years watching the military turn people into weapons. I won't let that happen to you." They emerged from the tunnels near the motor pool, where Marcus had positioned an unmarked civilian vehicle during the early morning hours. As they approached the truck, Marcus's encrypted radio buzzed with a message that made his decision feel even more urgent. "Colonel Webb, this is General Harrison. You are ordered to report immediately to the command post with Corpsman Martinez. We have teams on site to facilitate the transfer." Marcus turned off the radio without responding. General Harrison was the commanding officer for the entire regional command, and his personal involvement confirmed that Sarah's abilities had attracted attention at the highest levels of the military hierarchy. "They're not going to give up," Sarah said as they climbed into the truck. "No, they're not, which means we need to find answers fast." Marcus started the engine and drove carefully toward the base perimeter, using back roads that avoided the main areas where the helicopters had landed. Through his rearview mirror, he could see armed soldiers spreading out across the base in a systematic search pattern. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked. "The only place where we might find information about what's really happening. FOB Desert Rose was the closest to our position when it went dark. If we can get there before the official investigation teams, we might learn something useful." The drive to Desert Rose took them through 40 miles of desert terrain that Marcus knew well from years of operations in the region. But as they approached the base perimeter, it became clear that something extraordinary had happened. FOB Desert Rose stood completely intact and apparently undamaged, but it was also completely empty. Marcus parked the truck outside the main gate and approached on foot with Sarah close behind. The base showed no signs of battle damage, no evidence of hasty evacuation, no indication of any kind of struggle or emergency. "It's like everyone just vanished," Sarah whispered. They found the gate unlocked and entered the base cautiously. Equipment was still in place. Vehicles were parked in orderly rows, and personal belongings remained in the living quarters exactly as if their owners had stepped away for a few minutes. But there were no people anywhere. 200 soldiers don't just disappear, Marcus said, though the evidence suggested otherwise. They made their way to the medical facility, which Sarah examined with the trained eye of a military medic. Here, they found the first clues about what had happened at Desert Rose. "Look at this." Sarah called Marcus over to examine a series of medical charts scattered across a desk. "These are the casualties from yesterday's attack. 24 wounded soldiers, all marked as stable and recovering." Marcus studied the charts. Like the soldiers at Sandstone, the casualties at Desert Rose had suffered severe injuries that had been treated with impossible efficiency and success. "But where are the patients?" Marcus asked. Sarah moved deeper into the medical facility, examining equipment and supplies. "Sir, everything here is clean and organized, like someone prepared for a thorough inspection. But look at this." She pointed to a supply cabinet that had been emptied of all medications and emergency medical equipment. Someone took everything that could be used to treat trauma cases. "The medic, maybe, but why take supplies if you're leaving the base?" As they continued their investigation, Marcus began to piece together a disturbing picture. The base hadn't been evacuated in panic or emergency. Someone had systematically removed all personnel while leaving everything else in perfect order. "This feels like a cover-up," Marcus concluded. Someone wanted to erase all evidence of what happened here. They moved to the communications center, where Marcus hoped to find records of the base's final transmissions. What he discovered there made the situation even more troubling. The communication logs showed normal routine traffic until exactly midnight, when all transmissions suddenly stopped. But the equipment was still functioning, and there were no signs of damage or system failure. They cut communications deliberately, Marcus realized. Someone wanted to isolate this base from outside contact. Sarah was examining a computer terminal that had been left active. Sir, look at this. There's a message queued in the system, but it was never sent. Marcus read over her shoulder. The message was addressed to Regional Command and consisted of a single line. The Ancient Ones have returned. The medics were just the beginning. Ancient Ones? Marcus repeated. What does that mean? I don't know, but it matches what I felt during the attack at Sandstone. That presence I mentioned, like something old and powerful, was watching. Marcus saved the message to a portable drive and continued searching the communication center. In a locked drawer, he found a folder marked Classification, above Top Secret, that contained documents he'd never seen before. The folder contained reports of similar incidents dating back 15 years. Soldiers developing unexplained abilities during combat situations. Medical personnel achieving impossible results under emergency conditions. Entire units displaying coordinated capabilities that defied normal training and experience. This has been happening for years, Marcus said, scanning through the reports. But someone's been covering it up. Sir, look at the dates, Sarah pointed out. The incidents have been increasing in frequency over the past 3 months, and they're all happening in this region. Marcus studied the pattern of incidents marked on maps throughout the folder. They formed a clear progression, starting with isolated events 15 years ago and building to the coordinated attacks of the previous night. It's like something has been gradually awakening, Sarah observed, building up to something bigger, or testing us, Marcus replied grimly. Seeing how we respond to enhanced abilities, how the military handles unexplained phenomena. A sound outside the communication center made them both freeze. Vehicle engines, multiple trucks moving rapidly across the base. Marcus looked through the window and saw a convoy of military vehicles approaching the main building. Unlike the helicopters at Sandstone, these vehicles bore standard military markings and appear to be part of a legitimate investigation team. We need to leave, Marcus said. Now. They gathered the classified folder and headed for a rear exit, but Sarah stopped suddenly as they reached the door. Wait, she said, closing her eyes and concentrating. There's something else here. I can feel it. Feel what? People. Injured people. They're underground somewhere. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. If there were survivors at Desert Rose, they had to be found. But if the investigation team was part of the same organization that had taken the other medics, approaching them could be dangerous. How many people? Where exactly? Sarah moved through the medical facility with her eyes closed, following some internal sense that Marcus couldn't understand. She led him to a section of the building he hadn't examined before, where a concealed door was hidden behind medical supply cabinets. Behind the door, stairs descended into a basement area that didn't appear on any base schematics Marcus had seen. Emergency lighting illuminated a corridor that extended deep underground. Down there, Sarah said with certainty, at least 20 people, maybe more. Some of them are hurt. Marcus made a difficult decision. You go help the wounded. I'll deal with the investigation team. Sir, that's too dangerous. So, is leaving injured soldiers to die? That's an order, corpsman. Marcus returned to the main building as Sarah descended into the underground facility. Outside, he could see members of the investigation team setting up equipment and beginning their systematic examination of the base. He walked out the front door with his hands visible and his military bearing clearly displayed. The team leader, a colonel he didn't recognize, approached with cautious professionalism. Colonel Webb, you're supposed to be at FOB Sandstone. I am. Was. I came here looking for answers about what happened to my soldiers. This is a classified investigation site. You need to leave immediately. Marcus studied the man's insignia and bearing. Standard military, nothing unusual or threatening. But the speed with which they'd arrived and the specialized equipment they were deploying suggested this wasn't a routine investigation. Colonel, I have 37 soldiers at Sandstone who experienced impossible medical treatment from a single medic. 3 other bases in my region have gone dark after similar incidents. I need to understand what's happening in my operational area. The colonel's expression softened slightly. Webb, I understand your concern, but This situation is beyond normal operational parameters. There are elements involved that require specialized handling. What kind of elements? Elements that could destabilize everything we understand about human capability and military medicine. Your medic, Corpsman Martinez, needs to be brought in for evaluation and protection. Protection from what? Before the colonel could answer, an explosion echoed from beneath the building. Marcus felt the ground shake, and dust fell from the ceiling of the structure behind him. What the hell was that? The colonel demanded. Marcus realized with growing alarm that Sarah had found more than wounded soldiers in the underground facility. The explosion suggested she'd encountered resistance, possibly from whatever force had been responsible for the disappearances. "I need to get down there," Marcus told the colonel. "One of my soldiers is in that basement." "Negative. My team will handle it." Another explosion, larger than the first, sent visible cracks through the building's foundation. Through the windows, Marcus could see lights flickering in the underground facility. The colonel was already directing his team to secure the building and establish a perimeter. But Marcus could see the uncertainty in their movements. Whatever they'd been briefed to expect, it hadn't included underground explosions and structural damage. Marcus's encrypted radio crackled with a transmission on a frequency he'd never heard before. Sarah's voice, strained but determined, came through clearly. "Sir, you need to get down here. I found the missing soldiers, but they're not exactly soldiers anymore. And there's something else. Something that explains everything that's been happening. Are you secure?" "For now. But whatever created our abilities, it's down here. And it's not finished with us yet." Marcus looked at the colonel, who was listening to the radio transmission with growing alarm. "Colonel, I'm going down there. You can either help or get out of the way. This is way above your clearance level, Webb. Then consider me read in, because one way or another, I'm going to find out what happened to my soldiers." As Marcus headed for the building entrance, more explosions echoed from underground. Whatever Sarah had discovered in the depths beneath FOB Desert Rose was fighting back, and the answers to everything that had happened were waiting in the darkness below. The colonel fell in a step beside him, no longer trying to prevent his involvement. "Webb, if we're going down there, you need to understand something. What we're dealing with isn't entirely human. Your medics didn't develop their abilities naturally. Then what gave them those abilities? Something that's been waiting underground for a very long time. Something that's been testing us, preparing us, getting ready to emerge." As they descended into the hidden facility, Marcus realized that the impossible medical recoveries at FOB Sandstone had been just the beginning. Whatever had given Sarah and the other medics their extraordinary abilities was about to reveal itself, and the implications would extend far beyond military medicine. The war they'd been fighting on the surface was about to become something entirely different, and Marcus had the unsettling feeling that humanity was about to discover it wasn't alone in the universe. Behind them, the sound of approaching aircraft filled the desert air. But ahead of them, in the depths of the underground facility, something ancient and powerful was stirring to life, and the fate of everyone who had been touched by its influence hung in the balance.